Peace and love, family. Welcome to another Read Book Club discussion. We are discussing the hidden cost of being African American, how wealth perpetuates inequality by Thomas Shapiro, family. Tonight, we're going to be discussing two chapters, but we're not going to hold you long. We all agreed that we're going to dedicate 30 minutes to discussing chapter 2 and then another 30 minutes dedicated to discussing chapter 3. So I'm your host, Dr. Oya Edwa Ma'at, and I have my kings in the building. I'll let each one of the kings introduce themselves to you.
Hey guys, I'm Brother T, Brother T Wolo. I have a channel called JT Corn Rings where I produce corn rings out of precious metals. But one of my hobbies that I love is reading books, especially on Dr. Ma'at's platform.
How you doing? My name is Brother Everett, Secretary of the UNIA ACL in Baltimore, Maryland, and blessed to be here to read this phenomenal book.
Wonderful. And tell them about your truth to power, your truth, not truth to power, truth and power. Tell them about your show, Brother Everett.
Real Truth and Power podcast. Go to YouTube, Real Truth and Power. Hit that subscribe button. We just interviewed a Nigerian presidential candidate. So just put the promotion on that, and hopefully you guys like the info. You know, it's always good to network with our brothers over there and try to bring everybody together. So I'm blessed.
Ashe, and you have an event coming up, Brother Everett, on the 14th?
Well, it's the Marcus Garvey Day Festival. If you're in Baltimore, come on out to Harlem Park School. We'll be out there providing information. It's going to be some Black-owned vendors, some powerful speakers. So feel free to come on out and celebrate Marcus Garvey Day with us at the festival.
Absolutely, family. And be sure to come on out on August the 28th. And then, by the way, happy August, family. Happy Black August, family. And if you don't know why we call it Black August, a lot of our great heroes and sheroes were born in August. A lot of things happened. Some people transitioned in August. You had the Haitian Revolution. I mean, they planned it on August the 14th and they carried it out on August the 22nd. The Nat Turner Rebellion happened in the month of August. Our hero, the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, he was born in August. And also in August, they gave us our RBG flag, the red, black, and green flag. So there's a number of things that happen in August. So we just black it out and we call it Black August. And there are a lot of things happening literally around the country right now in celebration or in honor of Black August. In Baltimore, you see we have Garvey Day happening on August the 14th. You also have, we were supposed to have a Race First cookout at Drew Hill today, but unfortunately it rained. And so the organization, the head of the organization, PLM, Baba Emotep, they had to postpone it. But on August the 28th, they're going to have Race First rallies literally happening in about 9 cities. When I brought those brothers on a few weeks ago to talk about the Race First rallies, 6 or 7 cities were on board. Ohio, Arkansas, the city in Mississippi, Philadelphia, Baltimore, but LA just joined as a result of the podcast. New York, Buffalo, New York, they're on now. So Philadelphia, Baltimore, but I heard some feedback. I think Brother Everett, that was you. But so they're having a lot of Race First rallies happening, you know, in different cities. So family, be sure to go and check out the video that I did with, matter of fact, it was 2 videos that I did prior to this one called Race First. Go back and get the coordinators' information so that you can find out what's happening in your city, all right, on the 28th. Because I know I'll definitely be one in the number on August the 28th. And also in Baltimore, Brother Tawolo, I'm not sure if you heard, but we're bringing Dr. Boyce Watkins here, I believe either on the 27th or the 29th. Dr. Boyce Watkins will be here to talk about you know, changing the mindset of the Black community, creating a billionaire mindset. And so he'll be here either on the 27th or the 29th. We're trying not to have it on the 28th because that's the same day of the Race First rally. So we're trying to work with Dr. Boyce Watkins to see if he can come on, you know, the day before or the day after.
That's my guy. That's going to be good.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
He got powerful info.
Absolutely. And peace and love to New Black World Order in the building. And my beloved sister, A Beautiful Mind, she is in the building. She said, peace and love, everyone. Peace and love, Dr. Ma'at and guests. All right, so let's jump right into it. All right, we're going to be talking about this chapter 2 of the hidden cost of being an African American. Again, how wealth perpetuates inequality by Thomas Shapiro. So, chapter 2, title of chapter 2, the cost of being black and the advantage of being white. When I read that title, Brother T and Brother Everett, I said, oh my goodness. He said he came out strong. The cost of being black, he says, in the average of, I'm sorry, the advantage, I'm sorry, of being white. And so I like to start off with definitions because he presented us with a few definitions at the top of page 43. And the two definitions are as follows. Net worth. He says by net worth, we mean all assets minus all debts, and specifically include home equity. So we're talking about all assets minus all debts, and specifically include home equity. He also defines net financial assets. He says are restricted to liquid assets, those immediately available. He says specifically excluding home equity and cars, right? Because I mean, that makes sense to you because at the end of the day, I got to go out and sell the car. It's not right there immediately, right? And with the equity, I got to pull it out. It's not like right there immediately. So that made sense. And so he talks a whole lot in this chapter. He compares the net worth of black families to white families. He also compares the net financial assets of white families to black families. And he begins by driving this point home. And brother T, you told me this a whole lot. The amount of wealth that was created post World War II with the baby boomers. And so, Brother T, I like to pass that to you because I know you speak so well about that and how post World War II, that's when a lot of those white baby boomers, that's when a lot of financial gains were made by the white baby boomers. So go ahead, Brother T, and break that down.
Okay. I like to name this chapter of a new definition that I've never heard until I read on page 43 was the net financial assets. Just having the ability to have money liquid immediately, not just as it's stated in the facts of death benefits or your earnings or your home or your other liabilities, but the ability to have money when you need it right away. And now, Dr. Ma'at mentioned about the post-war World War II benefits that were given to all those who served in the war. The benefits that overhandedly was given to whites based off cities, based off states. Blacks were limited in the benefits of receiving the GI Bill and receiving benefits from buying homes. Now, they were able to go to schools, but most HBCUs did not have the degrees, the classes, the skill sets that were needed for the next generation, the building of this biggest middle class. So that is what Dr. Ma'at was mentioning.
Absolutely. And then he begins, Brother T, with some stats on page 44. He says wealth inequality have been increasing since 1980. By 1998, it had reached its worst level since 1929. The richest 1% of families controls 38% of total household wealth, and the top 20% controls 84%. He says financial wealth is even more lopsided. The richest 1% owns 47% of the value of stocks, bonds, real estate, businesses, and other financial instruments. And 1/5 of America's families control 93%. I mean, when I read that, Brother T, I mean, it took me back to, and people could say what they want about Yvette, and their information was solid. Yvette Carnell and what's the other brother named Antonio Moore.
Antonio Moore.
Yeah.
When I read these stats, all it did was reaffirm the things that they spoke about regarding, the racial wealth gap and wealth inequality that exists in America. And so then he moves on to the Duche. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this family's last name correctly, but the Duchette family story. So, Brother Everett, do you want to talk about the Duchette family?
Yes. Well, this was a family like any other family that was starting out. They wanted to get what we would call probably a starter home or something like that. So they were able to get a home. They got hooked up with a friend, I believe, that sold them the home probably at a discounted rate. I'm not sure what the rate was, but it was in a middle class white neighborhood. But I wanted to stop right there because that was something that really threw me back. He started to talk about the advantages of being in a middle class neighborhood that's white compared to a middle class neighborhood that's black, and the value of the homes. That stuck out with me. You know, like I get a home that we both get the same kind of home, but if my home, maybe it's not a row home, a single detached home in a black neighborhood, the same home in a white neighborhood, that value will be raised more. It has to do with a lot of the schools, a lot of the communication and things that they have. So that really just messed me up entirely. You know, when you start thinking about a home, we already have a disadvantage by being in the neighborhoods that we're at. Even if a lot of guys are trying to flip homes now, they're going in the city flipping homes. You know, imagine if you could buy a home in a white neighborhood. Imagine the value that would be as far as how it was raised. So that was one of the main things as far as having an advantage of being white, going into a white neighborhood, getting a home, that I really realized.
But let's remember this one thing. We want to go back to that page 44, just to mention. We don't want to look over this one point that was made in page 44. When the Duchette family moved into this home, correct?
Yes.
It states right down in the chapter that this home was built after World War II.
Yes.
Yeah.
Remember, a certain middle class was created because homes are now created to separate them from the former class. Because this was near their new jobs, near the new defense buildings that they worked through while they was in the war. When they got home from the war, after they went to school, they was able to buy homes near their jobs, which they could benefit from in this new middle class community.
Powerful. Oh my gosh, powerful. And so it talked about how, I think, let me see, how much did they make, Brother Everett? Please keep talking about the Duchette. So they moved into this middle class home. And
I think the home wound up going up to $1 million. Well, the net worth might have been $1 million, including the home. So their finances started to develop. But, you know, it goes back to what Brother Tawala was saying as far as having assets and having inheritance and things of that nature. How they were able to get this house at a fairly good deal in a good neighborhood, and that asset. He's always talking about that house, having a home, and how that asset grew. So I think if I'm not mistaken, a home that they got went up to maybe
But their net
200,000 or something. Yeah. Go ahead, Brother Tawala.
The net worth, the Duchette's net worth, including their home, equaled $1 million.
Yeah.
Now, because of the benefits, because of the transformative assets that was passed down to this family, also this family's ability to move into a middle-class neighborhood, also they had the ability to work at jobs. One of the Duchettes made $200,000 a year. That's not cheap change there. That's an ability to also to gain more assets as they live. And as we'll learn later on, that there's more than just earning when you have that helping hand of that transformative asset and inheritance that comes along from the next generation or the previous generation.
Let me ask you a question, brothers, because I missed it. Where did they talk about their inheritance? Because I'm looking on the page and I see it talked about their income. Like you said, one of them made, you know, it said the pension plans totals, they have access to their net financial stuff. But I'm trying to see where they inherited the money.
Okay.
Where they actually inherited. So I don't see it here. I'm looking at what I got from them is how they basically leverage their income to create wealth, but I don't see where they actually inherited.
I think, and I could be mistaken, but I just think that they got the home. It was like maybe a bargain from a friend. Yeah, yes. Something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then that, and the point that Brother Tawolo is saying is that it was built right after World War II. And so they were able to, so they moved into the right neighborhood at the right time, and how that helped build their net worth. And it also talked about how they grabbed an investment property, some like vacation home they were able to grab, and so, with, the more properties you own, that's a tax break and all sorts of stuff. You know.
Well, this is that's the ability of having that liquid cash. They had over, I think they had a certain amount, $400,000 in assets, but had the ability to have like ability to have like over $100 to $200,000 in cash they can grab right away. But it's
that's
absolutely
very
amazing.
important. Yeah, and you know what? I wanted to just piggyback off of when you were talking about definitions, both of you, that net worth. Because when I always was growing up being economically not smart, I would think my net worth was what I made. You know, this is how much I make a year. That's my net worth. But now when they breaking it down and you start thinking my net worth is my asset. So if I don't have a home, anything, it is pretty much my salary, but minus my expenses. So it's a lot of people probably making 50, 60,000 a year, maybe even more, but they got student loans and stuff like that. So once you subtract that, your net worth isn't really anything at all. So I think that he's already putting that in there, net worth minus, you know, your expenses and all of your bills and stuff like that. And even your credit to a certain degree, you know, it goes against your net worth. So, you know, we have to start acquiring those liquid assets, like Brother Tuolo says, and getting those homes and getting those good investments and stuff like that to take care of our future kids.
Absolutely. And then he moves into talking about the racial wealth gap. He says the typical Black household earns 59 cents for every dollar earned by the typical white household. He says the net worth of typical white families is 81,000 net worth. So like you said, that's assets minus debts. Worth 81,000 compared to 8,000 for Black families.
That's
like,
crazy.
Like, do you hear that? So
that's crazy.
Like $81,000, their assets minus their debts. Average white family, 81,000. Us, our assets minus our debts, $8,000. I was blown away. And he says this baseline racial wealth gap then shows that Black families possess only 10 cents for every dollar of wealth held by white families. I thought that was powerful. And then he says in dollars, the baseline racial wealth gap, he says is robust. The typical white family's wealth is $73,000 more than the typical Black families. He said even though both white and Black families increased their net worth between 1988 and white 1999, the Black wealth gap actually grew by 16,000 just in 1999 alone. Just in 1999.
And we still that far away. That's crazy.
Yeah. And he actually ends by saying that. He says, while families are doing better, inequality has increased because of the perpetuation of assets that we were not able to get and to perpetuate in our community. So then he moves into a discussion on the connection between income and wealth. Which one of you brothers want to build?
Go ahead, Brother Eric, because I'm still going, but I want to go back to another point.
No problem. Well, I want to go back at kind of towards the bottom when he starts talking about net worth for typical white households is pretty much $17,066, while Black households in the same quintile possess only $2,400. He's dropping a lot of stats here. The highest earning households net worth is $133,000, while the net worth for Black households in the highest income registers $43,000. And then he goes even further. The middle quintile, for example, typical net financial assets for white households, $6,800, Black households, $800. So he's dropping a lot of just these stats about the differences in the households and the net income. So I thought that was, as he goes on, just dropping a lot of statistics. But I thought that's just, how do we when you start thinking about the mentality, I want to work, I want to get a good job, I want to go to college to get me a better job, and you start thinking that I'm gonna come out and get a good job and I'm have a net assets, you know, that's not typically the case. And he's going to break it down as we go further on how they're able to obtain greater net worth rather than Black people.
Yeah, and then he says no matter how much or how little you make, then wealth is dramatically higher for white households. No matter how much you make, because of their assets. And so he says, as white and Black families progress through life, the life course, the different opportunities afforded by increasing disparate financial resources continue to compound racial inequality. Hold on, I'm gonna say that again because I heard some feedback. Is that you? Oh, that's Brother Tawolo. Okay, so again, I want to say that again. As white and black families progress through the life course, he says different opportunities afforded by increasing disparate financial resources continue to compound racial inequality and make it worse. So while we think, black folks, we looking at it like you said, Brother Everett, and peace to you. My mom is in the building, Minister Mr. Untouchable. My mother, Anna Scribner, brother Akata just joined us. And so again, family, it's just no matter how much income black folks, because we look at it, we like, daggone, black folks are graduating from college. I'm at Morgan. And so I see our children getting, 6-figure jobs. Some of them are coming out with PhDs. They're getting 6-figure jobs. Some of my students, they graduated. They're making 80,000, 70,000, and that's great. But even though we see in the black community that our incomes are increasing, racial inequity, I'm sorry, is it racial inequity? Yes. So inequity is still increasing, even though our income's increasing, just like our incomes are increasing, their incomes are increasing.
Exactly.
Also is even higher. And then they still have the advantage of being able to leverage the assets that are being passed down from generation to generation. Brother T, did you want to hop in?
Just wanted to bring up the point. Back to the Duchettes just for a second. The ability that the Duchettes had to move the way they wanted to move. That I was trying to go back to see exactly how did they receive their head start, which a lot that Tom Shapiro talks about, that families all receive the head start in some sense. One thing about the Duchettes is that they were very they did not want to talk too much about their finances. They didn't want to talk too much about their assets. They didn't want to share too much information. They kind of wanted you to only paint the picture that they received, they worked hard, that they put into their 401ks, and that they established this type of life. But you all know, based off of how this book is starting to go and what Tom Shapiro has put in place, every family receives some type of head start. Some type of head start that allowed them to live the life that they wanted, which allowed them to put their child in the school that they wanted, live in the neighborhood that they wanted, the Master Vista. This neighborhood, it was more than just the ability to live in a home that would give them a net worth. It was creating what we call a social status.
Teach.
Okay, so this is more than what assets can do. Not just give you that financial backing, but allows you to be the it person in society, the status quo. So that's why I wanted to kind of bring off before we moved any further.
No, I appreciate that. That was a dynamic point that you just made. But he continues in this section. He's talking about income. He said it's the most important variable in determining net worth. He says each additional dollar of income, annual income, generates $3.26 in net worth. So, he breaks that down, and he moves into saying that that income translates, for example, into more wealth for whites than for blacks. Everything else being equal, blacks accrue only $1.98 in wealth for each additional dollar earned, in comparison to $3.25 for whites. So again, if everything is equal, we're making the same income, they are still accumulating wealth at a more rapid rate, at a higher rate than we are.
Yeah, that's real important what you said, Dr. Mott, because on the other hand, when you listen to white people, they say that black people have came up. We getting the jobs, we making the money, we doing all of this, we're successful, we're buying homes. But as you look at it, no, it's not a level playing field because of how the net assets and the net worth has been created and how the system is keeping them ahead of us.
It's their ability to change the narrative.
Yeah,
and I want people to understand this one thing. We've been thrown this image of that a home is not an asset. Well, anything that we put money into is a liability, but the ability for something to be transferred to be a transformative asset makes the difference. That's the head start. because we've been thrown, okay, we don't need a home. We just pay down our debt and we invest in the market. They wanted us to kind of take away from the goal of having that transformative asset that can be passed on. Land ownership, home ownership is that one deciding factor to help every family in the next generation. And I'm going by Rich Dad Poor Dad. Sold the dream of a home not being an asset, but he never wanted to mention that it's not a transformative asset.
Right.
Mm, mm. Mm.
Right.
And then in this chapter, I'm on page 54, by the way, it says that change in family income is the most important factor in wealth changes. But for white folks, listen to this. He says family educational status changing from no college graduates to no college, I'm sorry, to college graduates. I'm sorry, from no college graduates to college graduates is not important in distinguishing wealth gainers from others. And so when I read that, Brother T, I said, oh my goodness. So for them, it doesn't matter. In the black community, we like, you got to go to college. If you got to go to college, you go to college, you got to get a good job. Because it's going to transform your life. For white folks, that's not the case. For white folks, it said it didn't matter for them whether the family went to college or don't go to college. All right. And so anyway, moving forward, he talks about this scenario. He said he flips it from, I'm at the bottom of page 54 up to 55. So he says, what happens if we swap white functions for black ones? So, i.e., if black people now receive the advantages of white people, right? He's like, well, what would happen, right? And so he says, oh, okay, I'm sorry. He says that he said to make our finding even more graphic, we can look at what would happen if whites receive the same returns as blacks on all factors. We already know, for instance, that whites receive $3.25 in additional wealth for each new dollar of income, and that for blacks, one additional income dollar generates only $1.98 in wealth. He said the idea here is to demonstrate the wealth effect of using blacks' wealth return for income instead of whites, and so on for every factor under analysis. He says we already know that the typical white family's mean net worth is $247,000, right? But what happens when we swap white functions for black ones? This method yields an easy sway of projecting what he calls the cost of being African American. He says this: swapping functions in this way lowers a family's net worth to $111,000. So those white folks that were worth $247,000, if they were to receive, if they were to switch our situations, if we were to flip them, that family that was worth $247,000 would then be worth $111,000 if they were in our position. And
that's over half. That's over half.
So literally, their net worth would have been reduced by more than 50% if they incurred the struggle that black people have incurred, that black people have.
And this is just that statement alone will help you to understand exactly why they make sure the policy is in their favor. Just to make sure, because it don't allow you to move no further than them, just enough to keep you going, but nothing to move you to that next level. It's ridiculous.
He says, and he ends this paragraph by saying, thus the cost of being black amounts to $136,000. So basically, like you said, more than half, right? It went from 247,000, and if you just swap them out, if you just change their color of their skin and made them black instead of white, they're no longer worth $247,000. They're now worth $111,000. So he said the cost of them being black was $136,000. He says in net financial assets, the cost of being African American amounts to $94,000. These numbers present our best attempt to put a dollar figure on penalties African Americans pay just because we are black.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Because we're black.
Wow.
Just because we're black. And he goes on to talk about how he says part of the power of dominant groups, in this case whites, is them seeing invisibility and the fact that their status is often taken for granted as if they are not active actors, agents, and benefactors in
Mhm.
an unequal relationship. I believe we must begin to discuss white advantage and its direct impact on blacks. So you have that white ignorance or that white privilege that they don't see, because as one of you brothers mentioned, throughout the book, throughout these chapters, a lot of these white families really in their minds believe that they are where they are in life because they worked hard and they
Mhm.
earned it. They never talk about the helping hand that they had. They don't
Right.
Mhm.
talk about the house that they got from great grandparents, or the stocks, the bonds, the cash, the insurance money that they got and that they've been perpetuating. They think they live in the life they're living because they worked hard,
Right.
And so I know we're gonna move into that. But did you brothers wanna build on the rest of the chapter? I know he mentions the Andrew family, and this was mind blowing for me. But I'm gonna let one of you brothers take it because I get carried away. But he
Well,
mentions the
go
go
ahead,
ahead with
go ahead. But I
the,
started off a little bit because this was Judith Andrews. She was a sister. She moved. She was at public housing. She was like 7 years old, and I believe she had brought in maybe an abandoned house for like $1,500.
Hmm.
She put about 30,000 into it, and the neighborhood grow. But what they talk about mostly about the neighborhood that stood out to me when we were talking, how usually black people do, they go into a neighborhood that's kind of been abandoned, boarded homes or whatever. She fixed up our house, and she was mentioning across the street how a lot of the elders had passed away, so the
Hmm.
houses wasn't being taken care of. So I immediately started thinking of the other family, the Duche, I believe, family, and how they were able to get a house, start up probably the same kind of house to a little one, build on the house while she was spending her money to fix her house up. That was one of the first things I thought about. But she still was able to gain wealth. But the fact that the neighborhoods, even with kind of considered still middle class at the time, like Brother Twillo always says, that fact of that net asset and the community they lived in, her advantage was just a little bit more harder than the Duchef family.
Yeah.
you wanted to go, brother Tawolo? Go ahead,
No,
brother.
I'm saying that was a good breakdown. I'm glad he brought that up in that part of the chapter, because you always look at the Duchettes and you look at now the Andrews. Now the Andrews is an example of a family who did it right. They had the ability to buy a home, but the home was in an area of low income. The homes, I think, it's no more than $40,000 to $70,000 in net worth. No ability to make any big waves for the next generation. Um, the neighborhood would have to be taken over and rebuilt and put with people who can definitely afford to take care of them homes. So it's that you see that even though we do it right, we still at a disadvantage unless we get into those proper neighborhoods, because the Andrews made pretty good money,
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken. And did she go to college?
yeah. I think
Yeah,
she
I
went to
believe she did
college.
go to
Yeah,
college.
it says that she was educated in the Catholic
Hmm.
School of Cleveland. She
Yeah.
said before becoming the first in her family to go to college. She
Right.
said, "Use yeah, go ahead." So go ahead.
So having the ability to go to college, he ended with a comparison, a kind of versus, the Duchettes against the Andrews, and to see that, hey, good job, a home, but the ability to make change was limited because that asset, even though it was an asset, it wasn't at the level. It was half, maybe 3/3. And then also, she had to pull from that asset in order to make some comfort for herself. Unlike the Duchettes, who had $700,000 liquid to pull
Mm-hmm.
from to gain more assets and also live the life that they wanted to live.
Yeah, he even says at the end, even though the home provides the Andrews about 40,000 equity, if it were a if it was a white middle class community, the value of the house would be higher and the home equity would be much larger.
Yes,
So
right
that's
there.
That's
that's
right.
social class right there. That's an advantage right there, just being in a white neighborhood.
Yep. And I mean, it's just it's crazy. And then I just want to go back before we close on chapter 2. He talks about he says here, I said, wow. He says that the black middle class communities are literally situated between poor communities and white communities. So they can't get into the white communities. But they don't need what they can afford not to live in the poor black communities. But in a sense, he says that racial segregation, because of racial segregation, he said typically situates black middle class neighborhoods right between poor black communities and whites. I immediately thought about where I grew up in Woodlawn. My parents moved to Woodlawn in 1976. When they moved to Woodlawn in 1976, and this is before, because now all the white folks moving in the city. But this was at a time where a lot of black people, they were living in the city, they grew up in the city, and you had the black flight. A lot of black folks moved out of the city into the suburbs, right? A lot of those boomers went into the suburbs. My family, my mom and dad were one of the, set of boomers who decided to go into Woodlawn. At that time, they told me when they first moved around there, it was only 2 black families on the block. And we were one of the black families. And so back then it was really a big deal to live in Woodlawn because it was predominantly white. But then as black people started coming to Woodlawn, you know what happened? White flight took place. So white folks started moving further out. And then Woodlawn became predominantly black. But if you know where Woodlawn is right there between, you got West Baltimore City is right there.
That's right.
Emerson Village is right up the street. So you got Woodlawn situated by, Emerson Village and all of those places. But then further out, but right between the counties, so where your Randallstown and Owens Mills, where all the white folks were moving. So I was like, wow, that's true. Racial segregation does leave the black middle class family sitting between the poor black community and then also the white communities.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I don't have anything else to say about chapter 2. I think we hit it on the hammer. I mean, hit the nail on the hammer. And Brother Everett, you hit it with the boom, where you were saying, I mean, those last couple of sentences when you said even though their home provides the Andrews with the equity, if it was in a middle class community, it'd be worth more. And I remember Brother Tuolo, when we were reading Blueprint for Black Power by Dr. Amos Wilson, he dropped an article that I'll never forget. It was a CNN article that talked about how black people lost billions of dollars simply because black people want to live around black folks. They called it a segregation tax.
That's right.
And said that we've lost billions of dollars just simply because we want to live in black neighborhoods.
Right.
Wow.
So it's bananas. I want to acknowledge brother young warrior, brother Jeremiah Africa. He's in the building. This young warrior repatriated. He's in Ghana now. I think the young brother's only like in his late 20s.
Wow.
I think he may be 26, 27, but he decided to repatriate in Ghana and build. And he did. I mean, I told him just to be, 26, 27 and saying, look, I'm going to move to Africa.
That's awesome.
I think that was, that's phenomenal. So I just want to salute him. He normally joins the live streams, but because of the time difference, he's unable to catch them live. So I just wanted to acknowledge my beloved African warrior in the building, Jeremiah Africa. So family, for those who are just joining us, I see Go Ham Lifestyle Vlogs. You're in the building. We're reading or discussing The Hidden Cost of Being African American. How Wealth Perpetuates Inequality by Thomas Shapiro. We just finished discussing chapter 2, and now we're moving into chapter 3. And family, even if you don't have the book or haven't read it, still stay for the build because you take away a lot of information. So in this particular chapter, it's called Inheritance, the Parent Thing. And so he gets into who actually inherits, who receives the inheritances, how much, and how does that impact their lives. So does one of the brothers want to spark it off?
I can go ahead. Well, he starts off with he calls it a little debate, and he's saying that he's going with his theory that a lot of the wealth is from inheritance, as opposed to people working hard. And I think he says one recent study found that 1/2 of a family's net worth derives from handed down transformative assets. A core part of his argument is that family inheritances, especially financial resources, are the primary means of passing class and race advantages and disadvantages from one generation to another. So he's letting you know right off the bat that, he's going to be coming with some facts that show that inheritance is a major part of generating a lot of wealth, especially for white people.
Okay, go ahead, brother. Go ahead, brother
No,
T.
I just want. I call this chapter parental welfare. This is this is one of the words I learned in this chapter: parental welfare.
Welfare. Yes.
So the ability. This is when this chapter really opens up about where this money came from, even for those who are reluctant to say they received help.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I love how he also begins. He talked about those transformative assets, but then he moves into the economic theory at the bottom of page 60. So he says a leading economic theory asserts that most people accumulate wealth from scratch each generation. Wealth grows over one's working life and is spent by one's death. So literally, that's what they think. That's what people put forth. But that's. I mean, I'm not an economist, but I'm telling you now, Shapiro he presents one hell of an argument that is not true. That is not true. That people just accumulate it from scratch. No, it is passed down from generation to generation. And so he moves into. I love how he talks about the capacity of parents. So he says net worth is the single most important piece of information about the prospective capacity of parents to assist their adult children financially at critical times, like buying a first home or paying for private schooling. And then he goes on to say the parental wealth measure captures the capacity of parents to give their children a head start on life. And so literally, our parents who have the ability, because some don't, but we don't realize the head start that they gave us. And this is Dr. Ma'at just being candid and trying to give my mother her flowers while she could smell them. I didn't realize what my mother was doing or what happened when she moved us to Woodlawn. So when we moved in Woodlawn, my mother and father, they bought the house in Woodlawn. So I grew up in Woodlawn. When I went to middle school, instead of going to I wanted to go to Woodlawn Middle, and one of my best friends, she's in the building right now, and she can attest to this. I wanted to go to Woodlawn Middle, which was like the community school. All of my friends were going to Woodlawn Middle, and my mother said, no. I'm sending you to John Paul Regional Catholic School, Latunda. Tell me in the chat if you remember that. So I was upset. I was crying. I don't want to go to, I'm going around there. She put me in the school, all these white kids. But she was paying for opportunities. So she sent me to private school, and then after that, from private school, I went to Poly, which is one of Baltimore's top engineering schools. Yeah. Then I got into some trouble there and ended up in Woodlawn. But I'm just saying, she did what she was supposed to do as a parent, and that was put me in a position to win. And so, this chapter really, like my best friend said, it look, my best friend, she just said, absolutely, so, I'm bearing witness. I got people in the building that bear witness to what I'm telling you, but it really hit hard for me because I thought about the assistance that some of our parents could give us, because some parents just weren't in a position to do, things like that. My mother was in a position to say, look, I bought my car. I gave her $2,600 to buy my first Geo Metro, but she said, I'll pay for the insurance. So she paid the insurance on it. I got a partial scholarship initially for Morgan, and mommy was there to say, I'll help you pay the fees and help you pay for books and also provide a roof over your head. So you just don't think about these things until I reflected on them now in reading this chapter. Just the ability of our parents to kind of put us in positions to be successful, financially successful in life.
And I'm sorry, Brother Swallow. And I wanted to piggyback off that, Dr. Mott, and I hope I might be skipping a little too far, but what you said is very important to what he's talking about in the book. Most times when we think of inheritance, we think of our people passing away, our relatives passing away, and us obtaining a house or life insurance or something like that. But like what you said, what your mom said, some of that inheritance is why we're still here, paying a bill, helping you with your student, like that. He dropped that in the book. And, it just made me think like, wow, I just wanted to say that. I think he's talking about that a little later. But
it again. Say it again, Brother Everett. So you said people think that inheritance is what you inherit when they die. But say it again, Brother Everett.
Yeah, it's not inheritance is not just when people pass away. It's what they do while they're alive, by helping you with bills, by giving you things. You know, your parent can help you with your college tuition, help you with your like you said, with your car insurance, all of those things, school bills, groceries while you're going through a hard time. All of our parents helped us out in any kind of way so we could pay our bills and stay on top. And I think that was something that we have to look into as well. You know what I mean? We got to start giving inheritance while we're here and still prepare for the big inheritance when we leave. So it's two type of inheritance we need to start focusing on.
Oh, powerful. Brother T, did you want to jump in?
My brother Everett said it all basically. That's exactly the point I wanted to make. Because the most important thing is because the parents, majority of the parents that we talked about in this book, had the ability to give their children because of the benefits that were given to them based off jobs, based off having homes. As we talked about in this chapter, the parental welfare was the ability to gain resources as they live. And I kind of put as a charge to most parents, especially those who read this chapter, to reflect on things that they could do for their children to put them in a better situation. Because as you'll see in this chapter, you had parents who paid rent, who was able to pay also to pay children care, to assist in ways that they may have not seen it as being an inheritance because there were gifts. To give money anywhere from $6,000. Was this something you had to pay back? No, it was a gift.
Yes.
Now you have to ask yourself, how was these parents allowed to do that in their retirement age? So things have been set up that we have to reflect on, and we have to make sure we plan for our loved ones, for our children as well.
And then I was thinking, how Black families we that whole notion of when your children turn 18, kick them out. Well, they got to go. You 18 now. I don't have to. That's not what happened with these white families. They've been helping their children are married with children, and they still provide financial support to those children. Like you said, Brother T, giving them a down payment on their homes, praying for private school and all kinds of things. And so I'm telling you, it's look at my mother. She said she went kicking all the way. That was it. When I went to private school, she said she went kicking all the way. But
so before we go on, this is what I wanted to explain on chapter 2. So even though the Duchettes did not mention exactly if they received any help or was explained, just by this chapter alone, that the parental wealth, the ability for them to gain the jobs that they had for $200,000, show that they may have went to private school, may have went to college education that was prepared from them by their parents. And they focus a lot about social status, the ability to live a certain life, to live a certain place. That's not just given and learned in one generation at times. That's something that's also passed.
Absolutely, passed down from generation to generation. And so at the bottom of page 62, he talks about Head Start assets, right? And Brother Everett mentioned this. He says right here, I will describe the concept of Head Start assets as a way of measuring what considerable financial assistance entails. Previously, he gets into the transformative assets. He says, previously, we discussed the idea of transformative assets, meaning resources that can put a family on an economic and social path beyond the means of their salaries. He said, we never quantified an amount because this is a relative concept based on the family's starting point and the requirements for upward mobility. So what I was thinking here, when he talked about this Head Start assets, typically when we go to baby showers, how we give, a gifts, we give you some Pampers or something like that, and that's great, or weddings. Now I see why Italian people, when they go to weddings, they hand the bride and groom an envelope. They give them money. People gift them with homes or gift them with down payments, Head Start assets, not just a bag of diapers. And so as Black folks, we got to start thinking like that when couples get married, it's great to show up with a card. It's great to show up with a card, a little token wedding gift, if that's what you prefer. But why not the family pool their resources together if possible and say, hey, look, I know you all are saving up for a home or you want to get home. The family has we've pulled our resources together. You give you 5,000 towards your, towards your home. Or I know you just welcome a new child. That child is going to need a lot of, some Pampers, food, whatever. So here's, another 5,000 that we're going to put in your account. We need to start thinking like that. We need to start thinking about giving our children Head Start assets, not just a bag of diapers. Head Start assets. I heard that Gerber has you can enroll your children in Gerber, and so that when they get 18, they don't have to pay for college. They can get a scholarship. Things like that need to be happening.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it's Gerber. Yeah. It's Gerber. So we need to be giving our children Head Start assets, not just a box of diapers when someone is born. But go ahead, Brother T.
I just started a policy for my youngest one, and the policy has a rider that's a part of it. It's a whole life policy, a $50,000 rider that she can allow to have 5 things given to her, and that's one, she can take money out when she go to college, or number 2, buy a home, number 3, start a business, or her first car. But the policy will still gain 4% interest yearly. She stopped paying it at the age of 37. If she retires, she receives $900 a month until she passes. This policy allows me to set up those things that I think I deem important for my child. It's, what I'm saying? So you have to look for these policies, look or save them. Remember, we can't get all this stuff from just working one job and then think we're going to save it all. There's things out there that people use that was not maybe told to us or set down at the family table or discussed, that's out there that can help set our children up for that next generation.
Absolutely. And then so he moves on. And Brother T, I just want to take time out to give you your flowers, because that is awesome, brother, what you're doing for your little one. That is phenomenal. And we as parents, we got to follow suit. We had to, like you said, we had to set our children up to win. Don't just bring them here. And as Baba Baruti, he has a book called To Educate a People. He talked about the difference between raising and rearing our children. He says, see, a lot of you raise your children. So raise it. That means you give them the basic necessities, food, clothing, and shelter. He said, but we need to get into the habit of rearing our children. So what morals, values, and norms are you translating and transmitting to your children? What financial position or class position are you putting your children in? So we got to get into the business of rearing versus raising. But anyway, I want to move on to page 66, because he also talks about culture capital being something that is transmitted. So not even just finances, not just money, in homes. He said culture capital, and he defines culture capital as, he says, culture capital refers to an understanding of what gives a person advantages or disadvantages in school, business. I'm sorry, let me start from the top. He says culture capital is yet another form of inheritance that allows families with ample assets to pass along non-monetary benefits to their children that give them a competitive edge in school, the job market, and other areas. Cultural capital refers to an understanding of what gives a person advantages or disadvantages in school, business, and social situations. So he said it could be something as simple as we're all out at dinner, with someone that could give you a thousands of dollars in scholarships, just knowing which fork is the salad fork versus the main course fork. Simple things like that. I mean, well, we're saying simple things like that, but but that cultural capital, he said, being able to, let's say that you're having an interview with someone and they have a certain painting on the wall, being able to look at that and say, oh, that painting was by so-and-so, and so the person say, oh, so now we can form a connection. So that culture capital. Go ahead, Brother T.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I don't know if you read my mind, Dr. Ma'at, because I was just about to say in the form of art. You're looking at the museums and things in that nature, right? The museums, when it talked up at the bottom of page 66, when he says cultural capital is acquired through family life, formal education, informal education experiences such as visiting museums and zoos, social connections, networks, friendships, proficiency in cultural codes, nuances, and community. I have a friend who owns a coin store, probably worth millions of bucks. But one thing he said in that transaction when we was talking is that he learned about art. He learned how to appraise art, and he learned that when people appreciate art and they also keep it for their homes, it's another way they transfer wealth. Because if you ever look at taxes and how they put their money into art, when it's time to sell or they need to transfer it to another country, you know that we can't move cash that easily, but it's very easy to move art, because once it goes to that new place, guess what? It now will gain value and be sold, and it has no restrictions. Well, that's a cultural code. That's a ability to know something. So when Jay-Z talked about it, studying art, not just putting art on your wall. I got a beautiful picture of Nina Simone on my wall, but the ability to understand what that art brings and how that it transfers wealth and how it can gain wealth. That's something that's taught culturally at the dinner table and then family meetings. It's something that's just, it's not just a simple thing of just owning it or just going to a museum. It's about gaining those parts. When you go travel, you gain it from this tribe and you put it in the museum, and you let the museum hold it for a year in the honor of the Weinberg family. So now it's part of a trust. It gains money. It's seen all over the world. These are ways, that's cultural codes that we have nothing to know about. But he's explaining it in his nuances in this chapter.
That happened with my son. Like you, Dr. Mott, I was able to get my son into a private school. He plays sports, so I got him in a school called Gilman in Baltimore. It's a powerful school. It's very, very private, so very expensive as well. And I remember when he was going through his recruiting and stuff like that. But we always looked at the academic point. And he was telling me, how those schools do all those field trips. They want to go to Rome, or they go. He said those kids were putting it on their application and getting into school. And I was trying to figure out what, I don't get it. But now looking at this, that's a part of culture that you're bringing, showing that you're culturally can expand. And when you come into a college, you bring that with you and uplift those other kids. So it was just really remarkable that we're not even thinking about that as far as inheritance, of making sure we keep our kids around a certain kind of environment or learning certain things so they can get that advantage. So yeah, I never thought about that.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And like you said, they do that. They do that a lot in a lot of those white schools. They take them to those, but like you said, it's a part of culture. But a lot of people don't understand that education is culture. It's culture. I had to tell without getting sidetracked, my students, engineering is culture, technology is culture, technology transmits culture. So when you're teaching STEM to Black African people, you can't teach it without making that cultural connection.
That's right.
You know what I mean? So so education is culture. So when we send our children to their schools, they are being acculturated. And I don't think people understand that's why it's imperative that we support, that we build and support African-centered schools. Because when you sending your children to schools, they are teaching, they are perpetuating, and they are enforcing an ideology, a cultural norms, societal norms. So education is a very complex process. And I don't think we understand that. And so, anyway, I don't want to get on that because that's my field all day. African-centered education. That is my thing. But let's move into, he says, who inherits? And he talks about a number of families. I mean, he makes the case in the first couple of pages. I mean, he talks about how, it's really white folks. First, it was the white baby boomers, and then he mentions the baby boomers. And then he says right here, I'm at the middle of 67. He says in the 90s, he says the first examinations of financial inheritances among normal American families appeared in the 1990s. Studies indicate that nearly 1 in 4 white families, so 1 out of 4 white families, received an inheritance after the death of the parent, averaging $144,000. 1 in 4, right? And then he says, in stark contrast, about 1 in 20 African-American families had inherited in this way, and their average inheritance amounted to $41,000. So we see who's inheriting. Go ahead.
I was gonna say he's dropping a lot of gems in this. A little below that he's talking about over the lifetime, whites inheritance are on the average 7 times larger than black inheritance. He just keeps dropping gems throughout. It's powerful. This chapter is deep.
Facts. And then he says a study suggests that about 1/3 of baby boomer whites, right, white baby boomers, he says in 1989 were due to receive future inheritances worth more than 25,000 versus fewer than 1 in 20 blacks. And like you said, like you just said, Brother Everett, over the lifetime, whites inheritance on average 7 times larger than blacks. It says the study estimates that the white black gap in the value of inheritances for baby boomers will be much larger than it is for those born before 1946. Black boomers, so that's my mother and their generation, black boomers will inherit 13 cents for every dollar inherited by white boomers. I mean, think about that. So the white boomers, they made out like a fat rat, right? As my grandmother would say, they made out like a fat rat, and they end up perpetuating that, passing their wealth down from generation to generation. But the black boomers, they didn't inherit from their, from their parents and their grandparents like that, like not monetarily. Like I know a lot of us have passed land down because in my family, my mother, in my family, on her side, her paternal side, they passed down land in acres, because back then a lot of people would just buy land in the South. So I do know a lot of black families, a lot of black boomers who did inherit land from like their grandparents, but not the money. It may have been the land, but then it's my mother was explaining to me it's a special type of land because you can't sell it. You can only pass it down from generation to generation. But and so anyway, they got some of us got some land, but we didn't actually get like any money, to develop the land. It's just like, here goes, here's 13 acres.
I wonder what law restricted that, because there's land that people can sell parts of it. They can also sell it to industries. So I wonder what law restricted your family from that's placed in Virginia. What
South
state?
Carolina. Yeah,
South Carolina. That says, hey, you're going to transfer it to family, but you can't sell it, because that's restrictive. That's a restrictive policy.
It's very restrictive.
A restrictive policy that may inhibit wealth.
Exactly. And Mama, could you speak to that in the chat for me? Because I know she's watching, but she was telling me that they can't sell it, but they can do things like, it was like trees growing on the land, so they could clear off the trees, sell the wood and stuff like that to companies, but they couldn't like sell the actual land, and that's what she had explained to me. Yeah. So you got a good point. I want to know now. You got me curious. Like what was the law?
It's almost like you're buying a house now, but you can't sell it.
Exactly. Exactly. So like you said, it's very restrictive. And so then he moves on. He talks about the black boomers versus white boomers. And he talked about how he says, 5 families. He talked about families receiving help from other family members. And,
parental welfare.
Yes, parental welfare. And then he moves into talking about the different families. And so, we don't have to go into each family. We can kind of name the families. I heard, he talked about the Berries. He talked about the Berries. He talked about Glenn and Barry Putnam. He talked about Sean and Shauna Ferguson. He talked about Nancy and Mark Collins. I'm trying to think, is there anyone else? Yep. So the Berries, the Conways. I missed the Conways. The Conways, Berries, Fergusons, and Holligans. And so, one of you brothers just kind of take it from here and explain what did all of them have in common?
The funny thing about Bridget, when I first started reading it, because I kind of laugh when I hear, well, when I received my parental welfare, I guess I received anywhere from about, $60,000 over the time. It's like they kind of like act like, oh, I received like $5,000 a year. Maybe it was a spot here, maybe it was a spot there. They kind of look at it like, oh, thanks, Mom, thanks, Dad. It's a simple gesture, is how they look at it. So if you look at anything that we receive, like welfare, a social assistance. It's deemed like, okay, it's something that's set into place to help. Well, Bridget Berry looked at it as, well, parents just help. It's just something that they do. So I don't
Yes.
look at it as being assistance. It's just, hey, I'm her daughter. So this is what I expect. Thank you, Mom. Thank you, Dad.
And then look, when Shapiro and when they interviewed her, they said, "Well, how did you get your assets?" She said, "I work for it." So on one end, you're admitting that you got $60,000 or $80,000 from your parents, but on the other end, you're saying you worked hard for your assets.
Right.
So he was just like, hold up, he was a little confused. He was a little baffled, instead of saying, well, look, my dad and my mom, they gave me $80,000. And as a result of that, I was able to go and purchase this home. I was able to invest. I was able to save. And as a result, right. And right, they had a self-made attitude, even though their parents, and like you said, Brother T, they just look at it. These white folks look at it as nothing. Right. Everybody has parents that give them $80,000, Head Start assets.
Don't you?
and so he says that a lot of white people, they adhere to what he calls the ideology of meritocracy. Yes. This is at the top of page 77. He said the ideology of meritocracy is the idea that positions are earned through hard work and personal achievement and through no resources other than their own. Mm-hmm. So that's what they believe. He says their own families talking about earning their assets through hard work, a solid work ethic, and playing by the rules legitimize their entitlement. So they feel like they're entitled to this stuff. Yeah. They're entitled to dad's, and mom's money, and so they don't understand. But then on the flip side, they say, I'm self-made. I did it by myself. So that brings me, Brother T, to the article that you sent me. Remember the millionaire? The guy's like a multimillionaire, and it was an article you sent me. He talked about how, he wasn't self-made, and how they had the white folks. He was actually speaking to white folks. He was saying we got to stop perpetuating that narrative that that we're just self-made. He said when we really do have a leg up. So he openly admitted, all of the different advantages that he had, and that is what contributed to his success in being an entrepreneur and a multi-millionaire.
Because they soon forget about those wedding gifts, $20,000. They forget about the Head Start to make sure that their child can go to that Montessori school, if I pronounce that correctly, that cost at maybe $20,000, $30,000. Oh, these are just gifts that grandma gave, that they left. So they forget about their heads, or they fail to mention, as we see here.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And so I want Brother Everett, did you want to jump in?
No, you know what? Before I forget though, because I just wanted to go back because it was something that was alarming me, and I had it in my notes. It just had me thinking on page 64 when he talks about another way to think about this finding is the monetary support among whites is most likely to go from parents to adult children, whereas elderly blacks are more likely to need help themselves from the adult children. That stuck in me, and I kept trying to find it, and I wanted to go back to that. And that just spoke highly about all of these families he's talking about. These parents are positioning their children while they're still, and they're helping them out, as well as inheritance when they pass. But 9 out of 10 times when there's a elderly black person, when they get of age, they're depending on their children. So that's really scaring me to that point where, I may have you set up for when I pass, but I need to make sure that I'm good now as well. And I need to make sure that my kids are good as they get older. It's just a train of thinking that I just wanted to make sure I got across.
No, that was powerful because awesome. I had that point underlined as well. My mother just responded. She said it's not a law. Thank you, Mama. She said my grandparents put that in their will to keep the property in the family from generation to generation. Okay.
Wow.
That's awesome. And that's another thing that should be spoke highly of, because that's someone who's thought ahead to realize keep this in the family. Because you heard so many things in the past that people took land because of taxes. They took faulty insurance policies. People took farms and things and that nature that we know from our black families. So this is foresight. that your grandparents had to say, hey, this is important. This must stay in the family. So everyone must remember that. And it mean passed on for the next generation so they can enjoy the benefits of having this land. So that's wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you
Mm-hmm.
so much, Brother T. So let's I have this last paragraph,
Okay.
that I wanted to read. I'm at the bottom of page 83. He says American society is of two minds about inheritance, and we seem to want it both ways. We take pride in our accomplishments, often marking them in monetary terms, and see nothing wrong in passing on what we earn to our children. Indeed, part of the motivation for working hard and acquiring things includes bettering our family and our children for future generations. This notion, however, collides with the equally strong held notion of meritocracy because inheritances are unearned, right? Represent a different playing field entirely and have precious little to do with merit, achievements, or accomplishments. We live with this duality partly because we deny what inheritances represent, partly because we see it in individual and family terms, and partly because the current political balance heavily favors those with advantages and privileges.
Mm,
Mm. And then lastly, he says, we tend to look only at the result, not the path of success. He says, noting this tendency in the stack deck, Lawrence Mitchell writes that this tendency to forget leads us to believe that our successes are due only to ourselves. And I put boom right next to it, because yeah, a lot of white folks, they think that they're self-made. They think that they
Mm-hmm.
made it and they're successful by their own doing, and don't realize the leg up that they have. That's why I don't like when white folks run around here and say, you all need to, my family pulled themselves up by the bootstraps. You got to pull. And I
Uh-huh.
said, the bootstraps. Do
so
you know how many handouts you've been given, and you telling us we need to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps? Go ahead, Brother T.
so this one here, this chapter is definitely more ammunition in our gun, because they say, oh, but I didn't receive an inheritance, but you received a living inheritance. You may have received a living inheritance. So it's another way to just kind of to understand, hey, what help was being paid when you was unemployed for 3 months? You know, did your wife, father give you this? Give you this? Yes, what we read in these families on chapter 3 is that even when the husband was out of work for 2 to 3 months, guess what? They received money, help pay the mortgage. Help they paid for their cars. They bought their cars. These little teeny living inheritance plans were given to these families to give them the helping hand while life went on day to day. So even if they didn't receive an inheritance, a big huge inheritance, we got to question and ask, what did you receive? What help did you receive on the way while you were
Yes.
building your family? Because a lot of this money that they kept, they was allowed to spend on the kids. So
Mm-hmm.
their life was taken care of, the major things. So the money they made today, they could get the kids pizza. They can take them to the movies. They can take them go-kart riding. All these
Yes.
things they make sure they can dump into their kids because the big things of life were taken care of. Um, and he mentioned that in page 84 of the last chapter, but I'll let you go right here, so we'll kind of end with that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. Did you have something you wanted to say, Brother T? Or
I'm basically on page 84,
go ahead.
the bottom paragraph. He says we need to recognize that inherited wealth can perpetuate inequality. The sociologist George Simmel called money a frightful leveler, but it might be more appropriate to understand that inherited money as a frightful conveyor and transmitter of inequality. Inheritance is not an achievement, and we are conflicted by it. Asking how inheritance has affected our lives can deepen our understanding of inequality. So that's one thing that we can kind of look at. Inheritance. We're looking at inheritance as something that's given to us at death and that can help us out. But this chapter, like I said, once again, helped us understand that parental welfare is another way that that these families benefited. So not just looking at what we can leave our children, but how we can help them while we're here is something we also have to look at.
No, absolutely. I mean, I just shoot. I'm gonna be honest. I want to give. I had some feedback. I want to. Oh, that's your brother Everett. I thought that was brother T. I want to just give my mother her flowers because look, brother T. A lot of people don't know your sister, Doctor. My aunt was struggling. You seen the struggle, T, and just what happened, what went down in 2013, and the struggle was real. And the struggle was real for about 5 years for me, and I was able to get on my feet around 2018, purchased a home, give thanks. And then my mom got sick. I don't know, Brother T, if I talked to you about that back in fall 2019, mommy got sick. And I was able to say, hey, mom, when she got out of the hospital, she's here with me. And so she ended up selling a property. And at the time we were in the household, all of us were like sharing cars. And so she sold a property and she bought me a car. That's parental welfare. The car has she bought it for me.
Yeah.
Her being here and going to the supermarket, going to Costco's, buying food. That's parental welfare. And so,
Um,
go ahead, brother T.
so can I just ask a question?
Please.
Your mom being an educator, has that something has that had something that maybe passed on to you as being an educator? Is that cultural?
Absolutely. It's
Oh,
absolutely
okay.
cultural.
Okay. I just want to
Absolutely.
know that it's just not about the music, traditions, and things that we may have for a country.
Teach.
Cultural is basically what we have in our household. It's that ability. If you sit down for an hour to read, because that's what I did today to read chapter 3. My daughter sat down to read for an hour.
Teach. Teach.
So
Teach.
it's not just the ability to say, "Hey, I know a language, a land." It's about what we do and our children see, so they can take to the next.
Absolutely.
That's what he was talking about. These things we involve them in, that we expose them to, that will help them in the generations to come.
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm sitting here listening to you thinking like you said, just the fact that I'm an educator, the fact that I love to read, that was a household value. That was one of our values. That was one of our norms in the house to read.
Hmm.
We had a big, library, like a little big bookshelf. I know mommy's watching right in the living room in the right hand corner, right, mom?
Hmm.
It was a book, I saw my mom's bookshelf and she
Right.
she reads. So I grew up to become a reader. Like you said, it's cultural.
Right.
She didn't want me to go the educator route. She said, educators don't make any money. I don't want you to be an educator. I want you to be an engineer. So I went the STEM route, and then the STEM route found me right back into educating. So, like you said, brother T, it's
Hmm.
not just the money. It's not just that. It's the culture in your household,
Hmm.
and so that you also inherit. And so give
You
thanks.
went through a
Give
lot of
thanks.
encyclopedias back in the day, huh, Dr. Mott?
Did I? Encyclopedias,
Their kids don't
dictionaries.
even know what they are now, but we had the
Yes.
encyclopedias
We had
instead
the
of the internet.
encyclopedias. Yep, we had the
Yeah.
Yes.
encyclopedias. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. She had the encyclopedias. She had dictionaries. She had all sorts of stuff. I say, Ma, I don't know this word. She go in the book, pull out the dictionary. Here you go. So
And
that's
that
the kind of household I grew up in.
and as one of the members of the chat said, Malasa G, he says, "Culture is what you do." Nearly
Ashe.
Fuller. So this is right. It's culture is what you do, and that's one thing that that's the definition and how he's using it in this chapter, which I think it's very important.
No, absolutely. What you said, culture is what you do. It's what you do. And we transmit culture. We transmit and we translate culture. All right, family. And so let me hold this up. Family, we're reading, we're reading The Hidden Cost of Being African American, How Wealth Perpetuates Inequality by Thomas Shapiro. So, family, we've covered, we've discussed the introduction, the preface. I want to say preface, but they pronounce it preface. The preface, the introduction, chapter 1. Today we discussed chapter 2 and chapter 3. You don't need the book to join us or have read the chapter to join us. It's always a great build. The build is always very, very, very informative. Brothers, what are we doing next week? Are we discussing chapter 3 and 4 so we catch up? Because I know it was two.
Four and
We
five.
missed. I mean, sorry, 4 and 5. Are we doing 4 and 5 next
Chapter
week?
4.
You
You
just
want to
want
do
to do
chapter
4?
4? Yeah, let's stick with 4.
We just stick with 4. So next week, family, join us back here at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time next Sunday to discuss chapter 4 of the hidden cost of being African American. Also, family, be sure to get your put it on the side. Get your Read Book Club t-shirt. You see that mama's rocking the Read Book Club t-shirt. Regain, elevate, aspire, determine. All right, make sure you get your Read Book Club t-shirt. And Brother T, you got to get yours, man. You got to call up Harvey. I sent you his number, Brother T. So
I
you got
texted
it.
him.
You text.
Yeah, but he was busy last week with everything y'all was going through.
Okay, got you. So, family, be sure to head on over to Hockey Customs. This is his email address right here, harvey.lewis@gmail.com, or you can go to Hockey. I'm going to put it on the screen at Hockey Customs. So if you have an IG, family, you can hit them up on IG and say, Brother Hockey, I need to get one of those Read Book Club shirts. And you see Mama's in the building rocking her Read Book Club t-shirt. Mama, thank you so much for the support. Peace and love to everyone in the chat. I see you, Brother Akata. I see you. And I know you made a comment earlier. You said, may I push back a little and humbly suggest while we are working our best assimilation game, take some time to work our Kuji Chagalia game in planning and deployment. And he said, I know Queen is a practitioner, but I hear exactly what you're saying, brother. Self-determined, Kuji Chagalia. I always say keep it at Kuji. So we got to keep it Kuji. Ashe. So join us back here, same time, same place. Peace, love, and light.